Thank you. I appreciate that. Wow. Quite that close. So, no, thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. As he said, my name is Michael McQuillen, and I'm the minority leader on the Indianapolis City County Council. I also have the duty of serving as chairman of the Marion County Republican Party. I hope that's not a problem for anybody here today. I actually had an interesting day. I always have interesting days. I started off this morning because today was National Walk to School Day. My wife Polly is the librarian at Crestview at 71st and Hague. So we actually started in one of your parking lots there this morning at about 6:45. Had about 100 kids and parents, and we walked to school. And it's kind of a fitness, healthy kind of thing that's done all across the country, and also bringing awareness to the need for sidewalks. Although fortunately we have pretty good luck right here with sidewalks right now. If we could just have good road redone to match the sidewalks, then we'd be in really good shape. I actually invited someone from DPW who will be helping us talk a little bit about the sidewalks and the roads and all that. But before I get on to my thoughts for the day, I just wanted to quickly tell you a little bit about my background and my own personal small business. I grew up on the south side of Indianapolis. I'm 51 years old. I've lived in Indianapolis my entire life. Went to Perry Meridian, University of Indianapolis, or Indiana Central UI, or whatever they call it today. And from there, I had a hobby that I turned into a career, and that was being an antique dealer. I would buy and sell trade items, collectibles of many kinds, and I basically specialized finally in political memorabilia and sold things at flea markets. And you kind of have to think about it like collecting coins or stamps, only these are little pieces of history that we deal in. And anything from scarce Abraham Lincoln ribbons to I Like Ike flasher buttons to picture campaign buttons from the 2016 campaigns today. So over time, I grew that business, kind of got out of doing the flea markets, and now we have a web-based company called PublicPrivate.com that we do most of our business. PublicPrivate.com will give you a really good deal if you happen to be on there and take a look. But as I said, my wife works there at Crestview. We travel less than we used to. We do several trade shows a year. And most of our small business we run is out of our house, operated out of our house. And we ship countless packages of memorabilia and items across the country on a regular basis. But one of the great things about that is it really provides me the opportunity to give my time to community in the way of local government service. And that's why I am here today. The topic that I kind of wanted to talk about is twofold. One is recently I've had a lot of experience with the concept of building a new jail here in Marion County. And for decades here in Marion County, there have been studies and studies and studies about the need to build a modern jail and to consolidate our criminal justice functions out of the city-county building to better utilize our space. Under our last mayor, Mayor Ballard, we had a plan laid out to make this decades-old dream a reality. And it was what we call a P3, a Public-Private Partnership. It was $1 billion project that would have brought together prosecutors, public defenders, jail health services, and more all under one roof. But our Indianapolis City County Council couldn't quite seem to get the details done. And now we have, of course, Mayor Hogsett, who won the election. And he took the step of, believe it or not, something that's never, ever been done. He's having another study. And we're going to have another study and a commission and another study. And when that whole thing's done, though, seriously, I'm sure they'll come to the same conclusion that we need a new jail and we need to consolidate those functions. So I hope we get there soon. And because I've learned a lot through this process, I think there's some principles that you can all, and myself even, can take away about this process in our communities of fact-finding and trying to build consensus among our stakeholders, and actually this time building these facilities. And the first principle that I think we want to talk about is we can't simply just build a jail. We can't just build a criminal justice center. We really need to build a community justice center. So the landscape around us is changing. Sentencing reforms are at the state right now. And I think everyone's getting a much better understanding of mental health issues, addictions. There's more research on recidivism. And there's actually a really strong national conversation going on right now about criminal justice system and reform. So as these massive shifts and changes are going on, it's no longer always just good enough to lock up the bad guys. And it's my first duty, I think, as a public servant to help protect the public. So whatever places we build, they need to be places that accomplish a lot. And in a world where we have really scarce public resources, that's really a difficult task, but I think it's an important one. So, for example, if we're going to rebuild our communities after the opioid or the opiate addiction problems we have in the country, and if we're going to strengthen our communities through having real dialogue and education on these issues with law enforcement and others, and if we're going to leave a legacy of progress, we have to put community in the word and the community in the center of our discussion about community justice centers. Now, the second principle I want to keep in mind is that there's a very strong connection between criminal justice and public health. Now, as a public servant, I should know better than anyone the actually devastating effects that the opioid epidemic is having on our cities and towns, and Indianapolis. I mean, how heartbreaking and infuriating is it when you have the TV on and you see a picture of a parent dead in the front seat of their car, overdosed, and there's a toddler in the back seat strapped in their chair still. It's just unbelievable. But here's the thing, most people don't wake up one morning and say, gee, I think I'm going to go find a needle, and I'm going to go find a heroin dealer. You know, do I go to the Yellow Pages? How do I do that? But no, this is a man-made epidemic. And in my opinion, and you can disagree, I think doctors are in part responsible for this. Because a lot of times doctors are rated on their patient satisfaction scores. And if a patient doesn't get all the opioids or drugs they think they need to handle pain issues, they could give a doctor a negative feedback. And then the doctor might make less money. So I feel that we've over-incentivized prescribing, and doctors over-prescribe at will sometimes. So if you or I go in for a dental procedure or a hip replacement or back surgery, we'll get some pills to help deal with the pain. And sometimes before people realize what's happened, they need the pills at a chemical level. And if they don't get them, then they really get sick. And then they need pills to keep from getting sick. And then finally we have reforms to keep the doctors from writing the prescriptions. They still need the drug, so they do something they never in their life would have thought they would do. They find a drug dealer and they put a needle in their arm. And we know what happens then. So this is a kind of a spiral that I think is out of control. This isn't a very happy speech I'm giving today, is it? I'm sorry, but I think it's really important to talk about this, and it's almost over, so just hang with me here. But I think it's important to keep in mind that when people are going through this spiral, they're out there dealing with the criminal justice center and with law enforcement because they have to steal to feed their addictions. They neglect their kids, and on it goes. And where do they end up? They mostly don't go to a treatment center. They end up in our jails. And thus back to the earlier problem. So, you know, this isn't a problem that I think we can just solve just here at the local Indianapolis level. But we do have to focus on what we can control. And that means keeping in mind that public health interaction, we have to have proper facilities and programming to handle these situations. And it's not just addiction and mental health. It's about managing people's chronic conditions, the connection to insurance, how things are paid for, and what we do when they re-enter society. And this is hard stuff. I mean, you think of our law enforcement people and our deputy sheriffs who didn't sign up to deal with this. But it's a changing world, and we have to change with it. So the third thing I want to ask you to keep in mind is how reentry and recidivism prevention work, and how maybe when we're thinking about building a new center, how we can design spaces that will encourage productive reentry for these folks, and how do we build systems to prevent the recidivism. And we don't have all the answers, and even if we did, we certainly don't have all the money to pay for all of it. So we continue to accrue research, and we continue to learn more about the best practices to deal with this. And I think if people can leave our systems better connected and in a more connected way with society, they'll do better. You know, they have to be healthy mentally and physically. They need to have insurance. They need to have a job, you know, a support network, family or friends. Do they have a place to live? Those are all considerations. So now it comes down to us and what we can do, what I can do, what you can do as a community, and what partnerships can we establish to help connect people upon this reentry. You know, talk to your local hospitals, Indiana Housing Community Development Authority, employers, Chamber of Commerce, a church like we're in today. And I know these are tough conversations to have and not the most comfortable thing to consider, but I think by having these conversations, we'll eventually build stronger communities. So before I close on this happy part of my talk here, I just want to, thank you again and ask you to thank the people who are in law enforcement and these people who are the providers and the treatment givers who work day in and day out to keep our communities safe and help these people who are suffering from addiction. So whether they're on the streets, in the jails, or any part of the legal service, we really thank them for their heroic service to Indianapolis. Second, then, we live, as I said earlier, in a world of limited resources, and it's very easy to use that as an excuse to say what we can't do. But instead, I'm challenged to be a leader in this and see what we can do with these limited resources. Very timely, since we're in a budget cycle right now in Indianapolis, and that's what my whole life is consumed by. So keep that in mind. But the third and final thing is how we can move forward with these community justice centers and places that are designed to protect the public and invest in our future by paying attention to those things that do matter, which is public health, reentry connection, engagement across communities, like where we are again today. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about, and I do appreciate the invitation, but I realize there are other more exciting things like why 71st Street is falling apart that you guys want to talk about. And I was very lucky to have Mr. David Borden. David, why don't you stand up? David's the Assistant Administrator of Engineering for the DPW. And come on up here and join me, David. And when I don't know the answer to a question about why 71st is falling into a pit or a sinkhole, David, with his great engineering mind, does. So, but you don't have to ask about streets. You can ask about anything you want. And there you go. So ask me a question. Oh, no, applaud first. Yes, thank you. Applaud. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now that we did that, I'm glad to take any questions on anything, sir.
I live over on 82nd.
Mm-hmm.
That's
For 12 years, yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
When they started that project, we were given briefing from the DPW. On there, they gave me a number, a phone, a name. Said, this is the person who needs to call, needs to be updated. We're asked to sign up, which I did on the web for updates.
Mm-hmm.
So about halfway through the project, that stopped. The web page that I had used looks exactly like it used to use, with the erasure of the name and phone number of who contacted and called. Which there have been several.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I contacted over the last couple of years, I contacted the mayor's action line. Was told that phase of the project was done, which it wasn't. I had people, the area representatives in the mayor's office out to the house, handing out business cards.
You paid for those business cards, by the way.
I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And she had absolutely no idea of how the process with permitting and so forth worked.
Well.
I contacted the mayor's office.
Mm-hmm.
We started to get some action done on a few items.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still, you were told this is the contact for the project. The contact went away from the project, and nobody can give us a name of who do we call with complaints about this project.
Okay. Well, let me say something real quick, and then I'll throw David at the wolves after I do this. But part of the problem is that, we had a different administration that planned this whole thing, and different staff, in some cases, in place at that time. And when the new administration came in, some of those people went on to other opportunities. So not that makes an excuse that suddenly someone, now you're about to get a card here that will answer all your questions, and he's not going anywhere, believe me, but there has been a certain amount of turnover, in all fairness, and obviously some balls were dropped. So now that I've defended you, David, fix it, go.
Thank you for that, absolutely. So my business card says assistant administrator. I've actually now am head of all construction for City of Indianapolis. So now you can give me a call and I can answer those questions. I can get a hold of our public information office too, because that should not happen. We should be updating that website. We should be providing you guys information on all of that. I apologize that that's not happening. First thing tomorrow, I'll make sure I'll go in and I'll talk to those in charge. We had, like Councilor McQuillen said, there's been turnover with the neighborhood liaisons and stuff, so you may have a new representative. So there's a lot of people, a new administration change that, as he said, there's balls are being dropped and there's new people filling the roles, but that number right there, I can give you answers. I assure you, everything is valid and works. It's not going to send you to some other location. That'll go right to me. Not a problem. Absolutely, I understand.
I'll piggyback on one thing with that, since I've made fun of 71st Street a couple times, and that's only because I drive on 71st Street 4 times a day. The contract was awarded, the number's been assigned, the money's there, And the administration kept saying, well, we're going to get to it later this year, later this year, later this year. Well, it's October now. So I finally approached DPW, and they said, well, it's not going to happen this year. The money's there, but they have so many jobs that the money's there for, which is a good thing, that the contractors are backlogged and they can't actually physically start that project. So you've had the little piecemeal resurfacing to get us by, which if we don't have a horrible winter, hopefully that will work. But I do continue to get, reports of blown tires and bent rims and everything else because of that. I can tell you that I'm working with the administration, and they're eager to see it done also. They're not dragging their feet. It's just a matter of there are so many really, really important projects right now, and believe it or not, that is not the worst street in Marion County that we have right now. I could point to several others, but I am wanting to see that done soon, and I hope the moment the sun comes up in March or whenever the time to start again is, that they'll actually address 71st Street. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I'm actually going to push the contractor to put that at the front of the project. Keep in mind that when we do these resurfacing packages, it's more than just a street. It could be streets throughout the entire county. And typically the contractor dictates their schedule. They know what the overall project is. They have an overall deadline, and then we say go at it, and they determine how they want to schedule that. But I'm in contact with the contractor. I'll try to push that to be the first or at least one of the top 2 streets that gets done next spring.
Thank you. And one thing that does help is the lady, her name is Lori Miser. She's the director of DPW. She was actually previously the director of DPW under the other administration. So we have a good working relationship with her. She knows the problem. She's helping us, but there's just so much work. You have a follow-up, sir? Right. And I drove that every day as well. I'm very aware.
If I could add to that, I promise that's not going to be nearly as disruptive on 71st Street. 82nd's a full reconstruction and widening. This is more of a maintenance mill and overlay. It's a very fluid operation. There's no closures. Traffic will always be open. You might have a lane closure and a flagger, but it's not going to be nearly as impactful to you guys.
Do we have a question from someone other than the happy man over here at this? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Bonus time?
Yeah, we do not have any incentive in there like that at all.
I believe the state does that on a lot of things, and you'll hear in the high-profile, Interstate to Evansville project and things like that. They do that, but we don't have the ability, I don't think, to do that.
The incentive to get it done on time is there's liquidated damages if they don't complete by the appropriate time. So there is an incentive to complete by the completion date that we set.
Questions? Yes, sir. Hmm. It's a true concern because, back to my earlier remarks, occasionally someone will get loose. I mean, you can have people serving jury duty. You can have a children's group going up to the 26th floor to look at the city, and you can have a chain gang in bracelets and orange jumpsuits almost on the same elevator. So it's a recipe for disaster. David would agree. The administration would agree. It's just getting all the players together to actually make this change. And deplorable situations, right. I mean, we don't want the jail to be the Hotel Deluxe, but at the same time, you can't have inhumane situations and overcrowding and people doubling on bunks practically, and that can be a real problem. So that's why I'm committed, and others are committed to making a long-term solution. But you're right, that's been a long time coming, and it's not pretty, definitely.
Mike, I know what you see because I remember in jury duty a couple of years ago watching the convicts come through right down the hall outside the jury room. How much federal money can be pulled in for this jail renovation as a county, a state, and local proposition?
It'll depend on how they structure the project. The project I alluded to earlier that we were trying to put together last year, the Public-Private Partnership, it was $1 billion project, but it would have not entailed a tax increase. It would have all been paid for by the developers and everybody doing it. It's a slightly fiscal different situation now, different interest rates, and it's going to be incumbent upon this new committee that is studying the problem to come up with a plan to see if there are federal dollars. And believe me, if there are federal dollars, they will reach out and capture those. But it's just going to depend on when they launch and what's available. But I do know they would like to capture any money they can to help pay for that. Sir? Mm-hmm. Sure. Appreciate that. Right now we're in our budget session. That's getting ready to finalize on Monday. Monday, October 10th, we'll have our final vote, theoretically, on the budget. I think by law now the budget for the city has to be passed by the end of October. So right now all 25 counselors, myself included, are heading lots of committee meetings, taking testimony. There's so many interacting parts. Like I'm sure you all know, there's the mass transit referendum that'll be on the ballot this fall, and you'll get to vote, yes, do I want to allow a tax increase to have enhanced transportation and bus service in Indianapolis, or no? Well, part of that is we look at the Indigo budget and we're trying to decide, great song, we're trying to decide if that's going to fit in together well. And, Indigo has been a problem for years. The bus service isn't that great. I think I can say that. You're recording this, aren't you? So, great bus service here in Indianapolis. It's wonderful, but there's some need for more money and resources to make it better. Whether the taxpayers of Indianapolis are willing to do that or not, that's the first thing you can do. Go to the polls and decide, would you let us authorize a 0.25% interest or increase in your personal income tax? I was a big proponent of making it a public referendum item. I was one of the people that helped drive the field and said, yes, I want to allow the people a chance to vote, because we had to make that determination first. I am not under any circumstances telling people how to vote. I think you should vote your conscience on whether you want to have a little increase in your taxes to pay for that service. But getting involved, going to hearings, if there's something you're passionate about, whether it's the public library or health and hospital or the sports corp or any of those kinds of things that we take a look at, I encourage you to attend committee meetings. I encourage you to contact me, and there are always people like David who are glad to come out and talk to a community group or your neighborhood association or your Crime Watch block. Crime Watch, we just had a horrible break-in at 79th and Fall Creek in the preserve in my neighborhood 3 or 4 weeks ago. Suddenly now everybody is interested in having a Crime Watch block in their neighborhood, whereas before everybody felt like they lived in the promised land and they didn't have to worry about crime. Well, crime's up at the $10 million houses at Geist, too. It's everywhere, and you have to protect yourself. So just being vigilant, getting involved, asking questions, getting involved in your neighborhood associations, calling people like myself or David, those are the kind of things I would encourage you to do. I will actually leave a little pile of my cards somewhere up here if anybody wants it to have my contact information. And this has my personal cell phone number on it. And I'm glad to talk to anybody anytime, because that's what you elected me to do. So, ma'am? I was first elected to the council 8.5 years ago, so I'm about to begin my 9th year on the council. And every year when we've gone to budget season, everybody's always said, well, if you can get through this year's budget, next year's budget is going to be better. They are lying. It has never gotten better. It has continued to spiral down and get worse and tighter. I mean, we have like around $1 billion budget, give or take a few tens of millions of dollars. And the largest part of that is public safety. Our police, our fire, and all those folks. And, that's not the first thing you want to start picking at to make cuts. the mayor had what I thought was a great idea to lift the embargo on streetlights. And you guys are involved with streetlights with DPW, right? I thought that was a great idea. And then they kind of got into it and realized the continual cost and upkeep, and the project has been rolling out slower than they would like it to go. Because again, you have to look at next year's budget. Are we going to have the money to pay for another 50 or 100 streetlights? Streetlights can cut down on crime. It's a very important issue. So the sad answer is there is no magic answer that's going to make everything better. I don't want to propose a tax increase. We live in the Midwest. We live in Indianapolis. We have fairly low taxes. We're going to give you guys the opportunity to increase your taxes a little bit for public transit if you want. But I don't want to come back to you in a year or two and say, well, we really need to bump up 0.15 your personal income tax. That's not going to play very well. But at some point, that might be the answer we have to study. So the quick answer is to continue making Indianapolis a safe place where people want to move and, not flee the city, but come into the city and raise their family and get involved and spend their money and build our coffers with their spending and the sales tax they pay on things. That's the way to keep things going in the right direction. And fortunately, both parties, Republican and Democratic, are very interested in seeing that happen. So that's my best answer. Do you have any piggyback on the streetlights you wanted to say since I said streetlights?
Not as well versed in the streetlights, no. So.
Oh, no. No. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. The only thing that I've been briefed on that is now that they are using, I think it's the LED technology in the lights, it's much less cost, and that's good. But contractually, I believe that IPL has to be the one to provide it, yes. Right, and that's a state thing. The state has set up that monopoly, or lack for a better word. But when IPL wants to raise their rates or whatever, they have to make a rate case argument, and it has to be passed through the state. So they can't just set it wherever they want. Yeah, that's a good question. I would assume, speaking out of school here, that a lot of those advertising is more for public imaging than to actually get you to use their product, and you question the cost of that. And I guess that if you're the big monopoly utility, you don't want to be seen as the evil empire, so you do the commercials with the. Where are you going to play this video, by the way, that we're taking today? You don't want to be seen as the evil utility, and you want to show all the good things you do. And IPL does great things. They contribute to United Way and all these different things. But you're going to say, well, if they wouldn't do all those great things and just use our monopoly money to keep our rates a little bit lower, that would be a wonderful thing. So, the president of IPL would be the gentleman to answer that question, because I don't have a better answer than that. So. We are their big customer. And we love their commercials too. Okay. Any other questions? We can do this as long as you want. Yes, sir?
This is not directly to you, but I want to know what you know. Lawrence Township Library is woefully inadequate.
Mm-hmm.
I know they're somewhere in the timeline to get an update and a building improvement. What's the timeline on that? And can you just give us a very brief description of what they will do?
Timeline has changed twice since I've been on the council. Originally, there was a plot of land on East 56th Street, just east of where you guys live, on that corner at Lee Road or something, I think? Lee and 56, where they were going to build a brand spanking new library. And then we had our budget woes and the big slowdown. So the library is really good at drawing these little pie charts to show where the library building is and where the people who use it are, and they go out, another mile. And everybody that needs to use that branch is way east because of all the growth that's gone on in the city of Lawrence and eastern Lawrence Township. So it's still something that's being discussed. I don't think there's a date. I think everyone agrees there's the need to do this and to build the new branch. But at the same time then, if I was to bring that up in a committee meeting tomorrow night, then I think somebody would say, oh, but we just hit 100 17 murders in Indianapolis. So why don't we just hire 50 new police officers instead of building them? So it has to be kind of a give and take, and it's very complicated. But I agree. I would like to see another branch. I will tell you something you may not know. And do you all know who Deanne Heydrich is? Deanne's my buddy. Deanne volunteers for my wife at Crestview, at the Crestview Elementary School Library. This year, all the elementary schools and middle schools and high schools in Lawrence Township all became little mini branches of the Indianapolis Public Library. Did you already know that? So that really technically is an Indianapolis-Marion County Public Library branch as well as a school library. So that's one thing that I think here and in maybe Warren Township, they begin to combat the problems of not having as much accessibility as they do by rolling out this plan. So I give them credit for doing that and trying to increase, at least for the kids, the fact that they can get a book from here or Hague Roads Library, or they can get one from Washington Township. So there's improvements becoming while we're waiting for the big fix, which of course is a new branch. So, and then I could go down the speech about, the future of libraries and books in general with, digital literacy and all those things going on. And that's another whole set of arguments. So, is that a good answer? Did you like that answer? It's the best I got.
Yeah, it still doesn't please me, though. I mean,
Yeah.
if you go to Carmel or Fishers or Greenwood or any of the suburbs, Plainfield, I was over there last week, communities with less population than Lawrence Township have phenomenal libraries, have excellent police and fire.
And phenomenal roads.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Just a frustration.
No.
I like to go to the library and try to find a quiet place. That will never happen in Lawrence Township.
It won't happen now, but if we can get this under control.
I've been here 18 years, I'm still waiting. Because we built a big boondoggle downtown.
Oh, the Crystal Palace, yeah. Now, we have a very nice main branch library, and the townships would love to have something like that, for sure. Okay, questions? I saw other hands. Sir?
We can't. So most of our bridges they're expensive to replace or rehab. So what we do is we try to leverage federal funds for those. So we try to allocate X amount of dollars each year out of our budget to address those. And we currently keep an inventory and ratings on all of them, and we monitor those regularly. It's a requirement. So we look at the worst of the worst, and that's how we try to attack those and systematically improve those as we go.
That's a good question.
A lot. I could get you that number. I don't want to. I think I've got a number, but I don't even want to say it and be off. But we have quite a few. I want to say 1,200. Yeah.
It seems like the whole bridge issue only really crops up when someone in a tall truck doesn't read the sign about the low, amount of space, and then you get and that happens. It happens as much on the state bridges as it does on ours, but then it's a huge mess, and I agree. But those federal dollars are very important for that. Pastor, we'll keep doing questions as long as you... Okay, ma'am? We just had another interview session maybe a month and a half ago. I was downtown. They advertised all through Indiana to bring people in, and I was surprised the number. I mean, dozens and dozens and dozens of young men and women who were in there for that initial interview process. And I'm not sure exactly how it all works once they get past that point. I do know how paying for recruit classes pays once we get those people. But I would say there is still a really healthy number of people who are applying and who are interested. Morale is not horrible right now. Indianapolis, despite the little uptick in murders, is still a safe place to live. And we're lucky. We're a huge city. We're like the 13th largest city. And if you look at the 12 ahead of us, almost every one of them has had rioting in the streets, stores burned, cars set afire, and everything else. We're very lucky in Indianapolis, and I'm trying not to jinx this, that we haven't experienced that, and that helps keep our morale high too. So if we begin that downward spiral where bad things are happening, then it would be really problematic on finding those new people to get involved. But at this point, we're still really good, and we just have to keep bringing in the money to be able to pay for them. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. No, appreciate that. As the Republican leader of the council, and we have the Democratic mayor, I will tell you that the mayor reached out to me even before Election Day last year, and we had to sit down in my living room talking about what could and couldn't be, what's going to happen. He's been very good about including me in conversations. I've tried to do the same for him as different issues arise. Communication couldn't be much better. I will let you know there will probably be a little bit of a showdown on Monday when we have the budget vote, because there's a few parts of the budget that not everybody's comfortable with. But those are details, and that's not the bigger 30,000-foot question of are you communicating, are you talking. If you have occasional significant policy differences, we've worked that out. But yes, cordial, positive. I'm very happy with the way it's working too. Thanks. Oh, he beat you. Sir? Did the man behind you write this down for you to write, to ask this question? Is this your question? I'm sorry, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
So from 75th North is, the south of 75th is going to be tied into a much larger drainage improvement project as well, because that's something that we're looking into. We still have to acquire some right-of-way, some easements north of 75th.
Is there any
I believe on the master plan, yes. Is there anything currently in like the queue as far as programming? I don't believe so. I can look into that, but I think on our overall master plan, what we would ultimately like to do, yes. Yeah, I'm not sure on that one.
Don't know either. Pastor, this is your chance if you want to jump up here and do your thing.
Yeah, just a question I asked you, what do you see as the greatest role of faith community in one township? I know you can express an innumerable amount of needs within our community. Well, what is one that you think that you think the church, I mean, kind of give us a shot of reality here. What do you think we should be doing better than we haven't been doing? And I know that kind of puts you in a spot, but if you be willing to share that, I'd really appreciate it.
Well, specific to CUMC, since we've had the experience of Deanne and others like her who I know are out in the community working in food pantries and elementary schools and every imaginable thing, the volunteerism piece is fantastic. The reason I kind of picked the opioid epidemic to talk about is because drug addiction is a true concern. It's something the faith-based groups can very easily get involved with. I honestly don't know how involved you are with that particular set of circumstances and problems. But that's one that just kind of comes to my mind that has so many other facets to it that cause the upticks in crime and things like that, that by showing the compassion and working with people who need help and, you know, getting to the mother who's obviously in a horrible place and trying to minister to her before she takes her two kids out and smothers them somewhere because she's so depressed and such horrible things are happening. I mean, there's no way we can prevent every tragedy, and I get that. But your guys' outreach is, of any church in an area, I mean, this is far and above all others. And I just think keep doing what you're doing and that outreach. And then if I was to add something, the whole addiction scenario would be one that I would encourage you to continue to work with. So.
Yeah, we'll continue to be dreaming about that. We have Al-Anon, and I'll get it there. That we offer here, but we acknowledge that there's always more that we do. So I appreciate that piece and you guys helping me.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. Oh, another question, sir.
Related to streets, you know, Lawrence, the city of Lawrence, I believe, well, 56th Street in the city of Lawrence, is that the city of Indianapolis project or?
So the excluded cities on thoroughfares, we have the responsibility for maintenance. So that could be resurfacing and or some spot repairs, but that would be on the city. For full reconstruction stuff, that would fall on us and not the city of Lawrence.
Sir? Did my wife tell you to ask that question? I'm personally not the biggest roundabout fan. And all I can think about is the two semis who crashed into each other in a roundabout. I think it was last week. So what? No, I won't. I mean, I know on Midhofer between 42nd and 38th or 46th, somewhere in there, they're putting one or two roundabouts in. Maybe they're already completely in. I haven't been over to look. I guess, despite my bad attitude about roundabouts, they're wonderful. They save gas and time and usually accidents. I don't know specifically. Why am I answering a DPW question? I don't know specifically of any other roundabouts coming in this area, but David?
No, I don't believe it. The two you mentioned, 42nd and Midhofer, and 46th, I think both of those two are the only two that I'm aware of in that area.
Maybe we'll see how those go and see how our northeast side drivers handle those. But, if we follow the example of Carmel that I think has, 2,000 roundabouts, try go up there and skip a roundabout, so.
I could pass on to our traffic engineer and see if that's been assessed, absolutely.
I think we've exhausted them. All right. I have a little stack of my cards up here. Please reach out, call me, email me. I'd be glad to talk to you. I'd be glad to talk to your neighborhoods. I'd be glad to do whatever I can do to help. Thank you again very much.